The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine fairways of Augusta National when something extraordinary happened that would change Tiger Woods forever. As the world's most famous golfer stood on the practice tee, methodically working. Through his pre-tournament routine, an elderly man approached with a confidence that seemed to defy his fragile appearance. What happened next would become the most talked-about moment in golf history, not because of any shot Tiger made, but because of what this 91-year-old stranger was about to teach him about life itself. If you think you know what greatness looks like, this story will completely change your perspective. Make sure to hit that like button because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in the power of human spirit. Tiger Woods had seen it all. 15 major championships, countless records, the highest peaks of success and the deepest valleys of personal struggle. At 48, he thought he understood every aspect of golf and life. The year was 2024, and despite his legendary status, Tiger was going through one of those phases where golf felt more like an obligation than a passion. The magic that once consumed him seemed distant, buried under years of physical pain, public scrutiny, and the relentless pressure of maintaining his legacy. He arrived at Augusta National that Tuesday morning for a practice round. His movements mechanical, his mind elsewhere. The course was nearly empty, just the way he preferred it when working on his game away from the cameras and crowds. As Tiger lined up his third shot on the practice range, he became aware of someone watching him. Not unusual. People always watched Tiger Woods, but this felt different. When he finally looked up, he saw an elderly man standing at the edge of the range, leaning heavily on a walking cane, wearing clothes that looked like they belonged. In a golf shop from the 1970s, the man's face was weathered by decades of sun and wind, his white hair thin and neatly combed, but his eyes held something that immediately caught Tiger's attention. They sparkled with an intensity that seemed completely at odds with his frail physical appearance. "Excuse me, Mr. Woods," the old man called out, his voice surprisingly strong despite his age. "I've been watching you hit balls for the past 20 minutes, and I have to say your swing's gotten a bit stiff." Tiger paused mid-backswing, genuinely surprised. In his entire career, very few people had the audacity to offer him unsolicited advice, especially not elderly strangers on the practice range. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Tiger asked, setting down his club and walking closer to the man. The stranger smiled, extending a gnarled hand that still possessed a surprisingly firm grip. "Name's Harold Mackenzie, but everyone calls me Mac. I'm 91 years old, been playing golf for 78 years, and I'd like to challenge you to a match." Tiger couldn't help but chuckle, assuming this was some kind of publicity stunt or joke. "A match? Sir, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but—" Mac cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Not for money, not for cameras, not for anything except the pure love of the game. 9 holes right here, right now, you and me, Momano." There was something about the way Mac said it that made Tiger pause. The old man wasn't joking. His eyes held a seriousness that demanded respect. And despite every logical reason to politely decline, Tiger found himself intrigued. "You're serious about this," Tiger said, more as a statement than a question. Mac nodded slowly. "Dead serious. And I'll tell you what, if I can beat you on even one hole, you have to listen to a story I've been wanting to tell someone like you for a very long time." Tiger looked around the empty course, then back at Mac. Something about this encounter felt important, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Maybe it was the old man's unwavering confidence, or maybe it was Tiger's own curiosity about what could drive a 91-year-old to issue such a bold challenge. "All right, Mac," Tiger said finally, "but I should warn you. I don't take it easy on anyone, regardless of age." Mac's smile widened, revealing teeth that had seen better days but a spirit that seemed ageless. "Son, I wouldn't want it any other way." As they made their way to the first tee, Tiger couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just any random encounter. Mac moved slowly but deliberately, his cane tapping rhythmically against the cart path, and despite his obvious physical limitations, there was something about his posture that suggested he belonged on this course. Tiger had played with presidents, celebrities, and the greatest golfers in history, but he'd never felt quite this curious about an opponent. Mac pulled an ancient leather golf bag from the back of a worn golf cart, and Tiger was amazed to see clubs that looked like museum pieces, wooden drivers, blade irons with barely any perimeter weighting, and a putter that had clearly seen decades of use. "Those clubs are older than some of the trees on this course," Tiger observed, genuinely impressed by their condition. Mac ran his weathered fingers along the grip of his driver, a look of pure affection crossing his face. "This driver here, I got it in 1957 for my 24th birthday. Cost me 3 weeks' salary, but it was worth it. These clubs and I, we've been through everything together. Good rounds, bad rounds, heartbreak, celebration, you name it. They've never let me down, not once." Tiger found himself studying Mac more carefully. There was something about the way he handled his equipment, the reverence in his touch, that reminded Tiger of his own early relationship with golf. When had he lost that sense of wonder? When had his clubs become tools rather than companions? The first hole at Augusta National is a relatively straightforward par 4, but even for professional golfers it can be intimidating. Mac stepped up to the tee with the same deliberate confidence he'd shown earlier. His practice swings were slow but smooth, and Tiger noticed that despite his age, Mac's fundamentals were absolutely solid. His grip was perfect, his stance balanced, and his tempo had the kind of natural rhythm that couldn't be taught. When Mac finally addressed the ball, something remarkable happened. The years seemed to melt away from his face, and for a moment Tiger could see the young golfer Mac must have been 7 decades earlier. Mac's drive wasn't long by modern standards, maybe 180 yards, but it was straight down the middle of the fairway, perfectly positioned for his approach shot. Tiger followed with his typical powerful drive, sending the ball nearly 300 yards and leaving himself with just a wedge to the green. As they walked down the fairway together, Mac began to share pieces of his story. "I started playing golf when I was 13 years old," he said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "My father was a groundskeeper at a course in Ohio, and during the summer months I'd help him maintain the greens. In exchange, he'd let me play a few holes after closing time. Those were some of the happiest moments of my life. Just me, the course, and the sound of club meeting ball in the evening stillness." Tiger found himself walking slower than usual, matching Mac's pace and genuinely interested in what the old man had to say. "Did you ever play competitively?" he asked. Mac nodded, a bittersweet smile crossing his face. "Oh yes, I was quite good in my day. Won several club championships, made it to the finals of a few regional tournaments. I even had dreams of turning professional, but life had other plans." They reached Mac's ball, and Tiger watched as the old man selected what appeared to be a 5-iron from his vintage set. The approach shot that followed was nothing short of beautiful, a high, soft draw that landed on the green and rolled to within 12 feet of the pin. Tiger couldn't hide his surprise. This wasn't just lucky, this was the shot of someone who truly understood the game. Tiger's wedge shot was technically perfect, landing 3 feet from the hole, but somehow it seemed less impressive after watching Mac's artistic approach. As they walked onto the green, Tiger found himself studying Mac's putting routine. The old man took his time reading the break, his experienced eyes seeing subtleties that only come from decades of playing the game. When Mac finally stroked his putt, Tiger knew it was going in before the ball was halfway to the hole. It rolled smoothly across the green, caught the left edge of the cup, and disappeared with a satisfying rattle. Mac had just birdied the first hole at Augusta National, and Tiger hadn't even finished putting yet. "Well, I'll be damned," Tiger muttered under his breath, genuinely impressed. He sank his own birdie putt, but for the first time in years, his own excellent play felt secondary to what he'd just witnessed. Mac retrieved his ball from the cup with obvious satisfaction, but not arrogance. "1 down, 8 to go," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "And Tiger, that story I mentioned, I think it's time you heard the first chapter." As they made their way to the second tee, Mac began to reveal the deeper layers of his story. "In 1955, I was 22 years old and thought I had the world figured out," he said, settling into the passenger seat of Tiger's golf cart. "I'd just gotten married to the most beautiful woman in our small town, had landed a job at the local bank, and my golf game was the best it had ever been. I was cocky, maybe even arrogant, thinking that natural talent was all I needed to succeed." Tiger listened intently, something about Mac's tone suggesting this story was heading somewhere profound. "The club championship that year was the biggest tournament our town had ever hosted. Players came from 3 states away, and there was talk that a few golf magazine writers might even show up to cover it. I was the defending champion and the heavy favorite. The second hole presented a different challenge, a longer par 4 with water guarding the left side of the green. Mac's tee shot was again modest in distance but perfectly placed, while Tiger's drive flew well past Mac's ball, landing in the perfect position for an aggressive approach. I was paired in the final round with a man named Samuel Washington, Mac continued as they walked down the fairway. Sam was probably 60 years old, played with equipment even older than what I'm using today, and everyone figured he was just happy to be there. I barely acknowledged him during the practice round, spent most of my time talking to the other young hotshots about our plans for turning professional. Mac's approach shot to the second green was another work of art, landing softly and spinning back to within 8 feet of the pin. Tiger's shot, while technically superior, somehow seemed to lack the soul that Mac's possessed. The final round started exactly as everyone expected, Mac continued, lining up his putt with the same methodical care he'd shown on the first green. I was 3 shots ahead after 6 holes playing flawless golf, already thinking about my victory speech. Sam was struggling, had already taken a few penalty strokes, and I figured the tournament was over. That's when everything changed. Mac's putt rolled true again, another birdie, and Tiger realized he was not just being outplayed by a 91-year-old, he was being outclassed. Tiger made his own birdie, but the momentum clearly belonged to Mac. "What happened?" Tiger asked as they walked to the third tee, genuinely invested in the story now. Mac paused, his expression growing serious. "On the 7th hole, I hit what I thought was the perfect drive, right down the middle, maybe 20 yards past Sam's ball. I was feeling pretty pleased with myself when I heard Sam calling for help. His cart had broken down, and he was trying to push it up a small hill to reach his ball. He was clearly struggling, sweating heavily, looking like he might collapse from the effort. Mac selected his driver for the 3rd hole, but before addressing his ball, he turned to look directly at Tiger. "Do you know what I did, Tiger? I walked right past him, told myself it wasn't my problem, that I was in the middle of the most important round of my life, and I couldn't afford to lose focus." The 3rd hole at Augusta is the beautiful par 4 known for its dramatic elevation changes and strategic bunkering. Mac's drive found the fairway once again, and as they rode to their balls, he continued his story with obvious regret in his voice. "Sam eventually got his cart working and caught up to me at the green. I'd made par, he'd made bogey, and my lead was now 4 shots with 11 holes to play. The tournament was essentially over, but Sam did something that still haunts me to this day. He walked over to me, extended his hand, and said, 'Son, I hope you win today because a player with your talent deserves to succeed.' He said it with such sincerity, such genuine kindness, despite the fact that I'd refused to help him when he needed it most." Mac's approach shot to the 3rd green was his best yet. A towering iron that landed like a feather and settled 6 feet from the pin. Tiger's shot was good, but not great, and he could feel something shifting in both the match and his understanding of the man he was playing with. "That's when my game fell apart," Mac said, reading his putt with the same careful attention he'd given the previous holes. "Not because of the pressure, not because of nerves, but because I suddenly realized what kind of person I'd become. I'd been so focused on winning, so consumed with my own success, that I'd forgotten the most basic principle of golf and life. It's not just how you play the game, it's how you treat the people you play it with." Mac's putt rolled perfectly into the center of the cup, his 3rd consecutive birdie, and Tiger was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about golf anymore. This was about something much more important. "Did you lose the tournament?" Tiger asked, already knowing the answer. Mac nodded, but his expression wasn't one of regret. "Lost by 2 shots, and Sam Washington finished 2nd, just 1 shot behind me. But here's the thing, Tiger. It was the most important loss of my life, because it taught me what it really means to be a champion." The middle holes of their match became a masterclass in golf wisdom that Tiger had never expected to receive. Mac continued to play with the precision and artistry of someone who had spent nearly 8 decades perfecting his craft, while Tiger found himself struggling not with the technical aspects of the game, but with something deeper, a growing realization that he'd lost touch with the very essence of why he'd fallen in love with golf in the first place. Mac was now 3 holes up with 4 holes remaining, and the mathematical impossibility of the situation was less important to Tiger than the story that was unfolding. After that tournament in 1955, I spent a lot of time thinking about what golf really meant to me, Max said as they stood on the sixth tee, a challenging par 3 over water. I realized that all those years of chasing victories, of trying to prove I was better than everyone else, I'd missed the point entirely. Golf isn't about beating other people. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, both on and off the course. Mac's tee shot with his ancient 6-iron was a thing of beauty, carrying the water with ease and settling on the green 20 feet from the pin. Tiger's shot, while closer to the hole, somehow felt less significant than Mac's perfect execution with equipment that belonged in a golf museum. I kept playing competitive golf but with a completely different mindset, Mac continued, as they walked across the bridge to the green. I started helping other players, sharing what I'd learned, celebrating their successes as much as my own. And you know what happened? I started playing better golf than I ever had in my life. Won more tournaments in my 30s and 40s than I had in my 20s, not because I was more talented, but because I was playing for the right reasons. Tiger watched as Mac lined up his lengthy putt, noting the same careful attention to detail, the same respect for the game that had characterized every shot they'd played together. Mac's putt rolled smoothly across the green, breaking gently, left in the final few feet and coming to rest just inches from the hole. As he tapped in for par, Tiger realized that this 91-year-old man was giving him a lesson that had nothing to do with swing mechanics or course management. "Mac," Tiger said, removing his cap and running his hand through his hair, "can I ask you something? Why are you telling me this story? Why did you really challenge me to this match?" Mac smiled, the kind of smile that comes from someone who has lived long enough to understand what truly matters. "Because, Tiger, I've been watching you for years, not just your golf, but your journey, and I see a man who's achieved everything he ever dreamed of, but somewhere along the way lost sight of why those dreams mattered in the first place." The seventh hole required a precise drive through a narrow corridor of trees, and both men executed their tee shots perfectly. As they walked down the fairway together, Tiger found himself opening up in a way he rarely did with anyone. "You're right," he admitted. "Golf used to be pure joy for me. Every round was an adventure. Every shot was a chance to create something beautiful. Now it feels like I'm just going through the motions, trying to protect a legacy instead of building one." Mac nodded knowingly. "That's what happens when we start playing not to lose instead of playing to win. The fear of failure becomes stronger than the joy of success, and the game becomes a burden instead of a gift." Mac's approach shot to the seventh green was another masterpiece, a controlled draw that landed softly and rolled to within 10 feet of the pin. Tiger's shot was technically sound, but lacked the soul that seemed to infuse every one of Mac's swings. "Tell me about Sam Washington," Tiger said as they walked onto the green. "What happened to him after that tournament?" Mac's face lit up with genuine affection. "Sam became one of my closest friends. Turns out he'd been a professional golfer in the 1930s and 1940s, played in several major championships, but gave it up to serve in World War II. When he came back, golf had changed, the money had gotten bigger, and he decided he'd rather teach the game to young people than compete professionally. He taught me more about golf in the months after that tournament than I'd learned in all my previous years of playing," Mac continued, reading his putt with the same meticulous care he'd shown throughout the round. "Not about technique, though he certainly helped with that, but about character, about integrity, about what it means to be a true competitor. Sam taught me that the real measure of a golfer isn't how many tournaments they win, but how they handle both victory and defeat, how they treat their fellow competitors, and whether they leave the game better than they found it." Mac's putt rolled perfectly into the cup, another birdie, and Tiger realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Not just great golf, but great life lessons being delivered with every shot. Tiger made his own birdie, but the scoreboard was irrelevant now. With 2 holes remaining, Mac was 4 shots ahead, but more importantly, Tiger was beginning to understand the real purpose of this match. "Mac," he said as they walked to the 8th tee, "I have a feeling this story doesn't end with Sam Washington." Mac chuckled, the sound carrying decades of wisdom and experience. "You're right, Tiger. The best part is still coming, and it has everything to do with why I wanted to play this match with you today." The final 2 holes of their match would reveal the most extraordinary twist in Mac's story, one that would forever change how Tiger viewed not just golf, but his entire approach to life and legacy. The 8th hole at Augusta is one of the most challenging on the course, requiring both power and precision, and as Mac stood on the tee, noticed something different about his demeanor. The old man seemed almost emotional, his weathered hands gripping his vintage driver with an intensity that suggested these final holes held special significance. "Tiger, I need to tell you about my grandson," Mac said, his voice softer than it had been throughout their round. His name was David, and he was the most passionate young golfer I'd ever seen. Started playing when he was 6 years old, had natural talent that reminded me of myself at that age, but more importantly, he had something I'd lost along the way, pure, unbridled joy for the game. Mac's drive on the 8th hole was his longest of the day, catching a slight tailwind and rolling well past his previous efforts. Tiger's drive was longer still, but he was barely paying attention to his own ball, completely absorbed in Mac's story. "David idolized you," Mac continued as they made their way down the fairway. "Had posters of you on his bedroom wall, studied. Every tournament you played, could recite your career statistics better than most sports announcers. But it wasn't just your success that inspired him. It was the way you played the game, the intensity, the never-give-up attitude, the respect you showed for golf's traditions. You were his hero, Tiger, in the purest sense of the word." Tiger felt something tighten in his chest, sensing that this story was heading toward something profound and possibly heartbreaking. Mac's approach shot to the 8th green was slightly off-target, landing in the bunker beside the green, his first real mistake of the round. But instead of showing frustration, Mac simply nodded and continued his story. David was 16 years old when he was diagnosed with leukemia. The doctors gave him maybe a year, 18 months if the treatment went well. You know what his biggest concern was? Not about dying, not about missing graduation or prom or college. He was worried that he'd never get to meet you, never get to play golf with his hero. Tiger's hands were trembling slightly as he selected his club for his approach shot. The emotional weight of Mac's story affecting him more than any pressure he'd ever felt in professional competition. Tiger's shot to the green was perfect, technically, landing 12 feet from the pin, but he barely noticed where it finished. "Did David get to meet me?" Tiger asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. Mac was down in the bunker now, studying his lie with the same careful attention he'd given every shot, but Tiger could see tears forming in the old man's eyes. "No, he didn't get that chance. David passed away 3 years ago, just 2 weeks after his 19th birthday. But Tiger, in those final months, when he was too weak to play golf anymore, he would spend hours watching videos of your matches, studying your swing, talking about the day when he'd be strong enough to play again." Mac's bunker shot was executed with the skill of someone who had played this game for nearly 8 decades, the ball popping out softly and rolling to within 6 feet of the hole. As they walked onto the green together, Mac wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and continued. "The night before David died, he asked me to make him a promise. He said, 'Grandpa, if you ever get the chance to meet Tiger Woods, tell him that he made golf beautiful for a sick kid who needed something to believe in. Tell him that watching him play made me want to be brave, made me want to fight harder, made me feel like I was part of something bigger than my illness.'" Tiger had to step away from his putt, overwhelmed by the revelation. Everything about this day suddenly made perfect sense. Mac's confidence, his skill, his insistence on this match, the stories about character and integrity. This wasn't about golf at all. This was about a grandfather fulfilling a dying wish, using the language of the game they both loved to deliver a message that couldn't be conveyed any other way. "Mac, Tiger started, but the old man held up his hand. "Let me finish, son. David also asked me to tell you something else. He said that heroes aren't just people who win tournaments. They're people who inspire others to be better than they thought they could be. And he wanted you to know that even though you never met him, you were that kind of hero to him." Mackie lined up his putt with the same careful precision he'd shown all day. But now Tiger understood that every shot, every story, every moment of this match had been building to this revelation. Mac's putt rolled perfectly into the center of the cup, and as he retrieved his ball, he looked directly at Tiger with eyes that held decades of love, loss, and hope. "That's why I challenged you today, Tiger. Not to beat you at golf, Though, I have to admit that's been pretty satisfying. But to remind you of something you might have forgotten, you're not just a golfer. You're an inspiration to people you'll never meet, a source of hope for kids who need heroes, a reminder that greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but about how you make others feel about their own possibilities. The ninth and final hole of their match felt almost ceremonial as they walked to the tee together. Tiger was still 4 shots behind with 1 hole to play, but the scoreboard had become completely irrelevant. Mac's tee shot on the 9th was straight and true, landing exactly where he'd aimed, while Tiger's drive sailed well past it, but somehow felt less important than every shot Mac had played that day. "There's one more thing," Mac said as they walked down the fairway for the final time. "David left something for you. I've been carrying it in my golf bag for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to give it to you." Mac's final approach shot of the day was perhaps his most beautiful, a high, soft fade that landed on the front edge of the green and rolled slowly toward the pin, coming to rest just 4 feet away. Tiger's shot finished closer, but as they walked onto the green, Mac reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellow with age and worn from being handled countless times. "David wrote you a letter during his final weeks. He made me promise to give it to you someday when the moment felt right." Tiger accepted the letter with shaking hands, and as he read the words written in a teenager's careful handwriting, tears began streaming down his face. The letter was simple but profound, filled with gratitude for the joy Tiger had brought to a young man's life, admiration for his dedication to excellence, and hope that Tiger would continue to inspire others the way he had inspired David. The final paragraph read, "Mr. Woods, I know you'll probably never read this, but I wanted you to know that watching you play taught me that it's not about being perfect. It's about never giving up, about respecting the game and the people you play it with, and about remembering that every shot is a chance to create something beautiful. Thank you for showing me what it means to be a champion, not just in golf, but in life." Mac made his final putt of the day, completing a round that would be remembered not for the score, but for the lesson it taught. Tiger stood over his own putt, but before he could strike the ball, he walked over to Mac and embraced the old man, holding him tightly as years of suppressed emotion finally found their release. "Thank you," Tiger whispered. "Thank you for David's message. Thank you for this match. Thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with this game in the first place." Mac patted Tiger's back gently, the way a grandfather might comfort a grandchild. "David would be so proud to know that his hero got the message," Mac said softly. "And Tiger, he'd want you to know that it's never too late to rediscover the joy in what you do." Tiger returned to his putt with a completely different perspective. The 4-foot putt that would complete his round was no longer about completing a match or protecting his pride. It was about honoring the memory of a young man he'd never met, but who had taught him something invaluable about the true meaning of greatness.